this week, and you are either listening or the new and improved watching this week's episode, which is episode number 20 of the show. So this week we are going to dive heavily into camping without a tarp. So as the show title would state, we're going to be camping under the stars. Now, this is the first ever recorded video episode, so if you are watching in on YouTube or on Spotify, this show is all about outdoor recreation that includes camping, hiking, paddleboarding, surfing, skating, traveling, and everything in between. So I really hope you guys enjoy. And for those of you who are listening in, I might have some visual cues here today, so I apologize. I'm working on being able to kind of switch between audio and video on doing these things, so I will try to explain what it is I'm showing throughout the day. The first thing I'm going to show is my lovely Camp Hnp T-Shirt. This can be bought on the Heading North Podcast store. Just go to headingnorthpodcast.com/shop to pick this up, and this goes 100% to Rewild, which is a company, or excuse me, a nonprofit who is working to re-biodiversify the world. So 100% of the proceeds that go, that aren't into the spending of making the shirt itself, go to Rewild. So if you guys want to check that out, again, that is headingnorthpodcast.com/shop. But let's dive heavily into camping under the stars. Many of us have gone camping, whether we're using something like a camper or sleeping in the back of our vehicle or sleeping in a tent. I know I like to go backpacking and hiking, so I like to bring a tent along and do some overnights out on the trail. I've also camped in the back of my truck. So let's look at some ways that we can camp without using the tent and to really enjoy looking up at the stars at night. The first of which is going to be just sleeping on the ground. So I've done this quite a few times. Be prepared for some moisture or to get a little bit dirty. Your gear gets a little bit dirty. There's not a whole lot we can do about that when we're camping on the ground. Much like if you're camping in a tent on the beach, there's going to be sand and dirt that is always going to be able to get in. What you want to do as far as using items that aren't your tent, but also making sure that you protect your equipment, the first thing that you're going to need is something that is called a ground tarp. So whether you use a tent or not, a ground tarp is highly recommended. A ground tarp will help keep you and your gear clean, dry, and prevent damage. Regular tarp from Walmart will be fine, but you can also pick up some from Amazon. As I always say, I like to use Amazon or at REI or any other outdoor supply company that you would like to use. Now, on those nights where it is not necessarily a dry night, where you have a rainy night, you can also use a rain fly. This kind of negates the idea of completely sleeping under the stars, but it's highly recommended that you have one on standby just in case it does start to get damp. Weather can change, especially in a place like Minnesota or if you're in New England. Sometimes down south you'll have long periods without rain, but it's highly recommended to have it at least on standby. Even if it's starting to get dewy, you can always cover to make sure that you don't get too wet. Now, any experienced camper will tell you that a lot of our body temperature can be lost through the ground. So in order to avoid that when you are sleeping on the ground, you're going to want a sleeping pad. Now, I have, because it is our first video, my sleeping pad out here. So if those of you who are watching, this is a Therm-A-Rest Sleeping Pad. It is one of the self-inflating ones. This bundles up into a 3x4-inch container and can be packed easily in my gear. So that's something that's going to be used very well in order to keep myself from losing any of my body temperature through the ground while I sleep. Now, the cool thing about most of the Therm-A-Rest gear, if you get a sleeping bag that goes along with it or a sleeping bag that has the mount pieces on the bottom, my Therm-A-Rest will actually slide into my sleeping bag so that I don't end up coming off of my sleeping pad while I'm sleeping. This is going to be extremely useful when you're camping out underneath the stars, because that way you're not rolling off into dirt or into an area where you could get wet or lose the aforementioned body heat, but it keeps it right underneath you when you sleep, even when you toss and turn. And like I was just saying, you're also going to need a sleeping bag. A tent provides the ability to keep a lot of warmth during the summertime, and if you get a thicker, stronger tent for the wintertime, it keeps a lot of warmth inside, and sometimes you can get away with using a blanket, but I would highly recommend in either way to use a sleeping bag. So a sleeping bag is another essential, as I said, especially in colder weather. In warmer weather, blankets or even sleeping bag liners will be fine. I would just highly recommend having a sleeping bag with you. You can get a stuff sack sleeping bag that will be able to keep you nice and warm. Depending on the temperature, you could go with a 20 degree and higher bag, or you could even go a little bit higher than that depending on what time of year you're camping. So those are some options that you have if you're going to be doing some ground camping. Now, when it comes to other options, one of my favorite options for sleeping without a tent is hammock camping. So you can pick up a wonderful hammock. This one I got as a free gift for my purchase over at Paddle North here in Minnesota. And this hammock, I believe, is an Inu. I'm not sure because they have their own branding on it. But it comes with these straps, which you can't see. For those of you listening, I'm feeling the bottom of this bag, and it shows that there are a couple of tree-safe straps. If you listen into the hammocking episode that we have, I believe it was episode number 17 of Heading North, I'll talk heavily about using hammocks. But anyway, this is a great option where you're not on the ground. I do recommend still having your sleeping pad with you. That way you can put it underneath, because you still will lose a lot of temperature, especially with winds coming underneath of your body on the hammock. Some downsides to hammock camping, the main one being is that you won't always have an option for tree hooks, which is also or trees to mount yourself to. And you can use rocks or other man-made devices to keep your hammock up. But the best way to do it is to have two trees within a safe enough distance that you can comfortably hang your hammock. This would lead into why I think you should still bring your sleeping pad with you if you're deciding to go hammock camping, simply because if you end up in an area where you can't set up your hammock, you still have the option to sleep on the ground on your sleeping pad and keep yourself warm by not losing that temperature, either by being in the sleeping or on the sleeping bag on the ground where you lose your temperature through the ground, or while you're in your hammock and you lose the temperature from your body by winds and other breezes coming from underneath of your hammock. A couple good options that I like are going to be the Eno, any one. And then there's also the Sea to Summit brand, which has pro hammocks for singles and doubles. You've got Eagle's Nest Hammock. The Hammock Mantis UL is a really good option, and that comes with a bug liner on it. That's a big thing too when you are hammock camping or even camping just underneath the stars. There's going to be bugs, and tents usually protect you or create a natural bug barrier for you so that you don't have to worry about getting bit by mosquitoes or have any creepy crawlies crawling on you at night. So hammock camping does provide an option where you can get a hammock that has some type of bug tarp. Now, as far as using a rain fly or a tarp, this is something that is a great option and allows you to have some level of open air to the way you're camping and give you a nice view of the stars above you. So let's just kind of dive in. I'm not going to look too heavily at the different types of tarps you can get. Again, you can search on Amazon, REI, or anywhere else in order to get a decent tarp. But really, to build a tarp shelter, you just need some type of guideline or a line that you can hook to either a tree, or you can set up a couple of sticks and then you can hang it as some form of A-frame. I know a lot of people like to use their hiking or trekking poles, and what you do is you put a trekking pole at either end, you put your guideline in between those two poles, and then you have some type of lines that go down and can be staked into the ground to keep it nice and taut. This is a great option in damp areas where not necessarily is it raining, but you are going to have a lot of damp and dew that comes in throughout the night as temperatures change, especially in the northwest, northeast, and the northern part of Minnesota or the Midwest. Keep in mind, this will not keep bugs out, but you can also purchase a bug net that will attach onto the inside of a rain fly. It can be a bit of a hassle. Now, the last option that I have as far as camping external on the ground or outside is the Bivvy Sack. So Bivvy Sack is a waterproof shelter that goes around your sleeping bag, just like a tent that keeps the rain and bugs away. And it's has a very durable bottom for added protection to keep water out. Some of them are even made from Gore-Tex, making it much more waterproof and breathable. Bivvy shelters are a lot of fun. Keep in mind, if you are backpacking, it does add a good amount of extra weight. There are some ultralight options, but that is definitely something to think about. Now, as I said, that was my last option for ways to camp on the ground, but you also have the sleeping in car or truck option. This is something I do very heavily. I previously had a Chevy Colorado where I had a cap on the back and it allowed me to set up an air mattress in the back of my pickup truck. And sometimes I would keep the cap on, and sometimes I would take it off in order to be able to see the beautiful stars as I camped right next to Lake Superior a good amount of time last summer in 2021. So there are also options if you have an SUV or a sedan or any smaller vehicle. They actually make air mattresses that fold and fit directly into the back seat. And what happens is there's usually a couple of inflatable squares that take up where the feet would go while you're sitting in the car. That way you aren't falling over into the vehicle and you aren't limited to just the width of the seats themselves. These can be found pretty easily for $30 to $40 on Amazon. I wouldn't recommend going too far into finding an option, as I purchased all three of the ones I've used for either myself or my girlfriend's son and on Amazon. So it makes it, kind of easy and a cost-effective way to go camping without a tent. If any of you want to add any type of suggestion to outdoor camping or have any questions, or if you want to add in any insight or tell us a camping story you have while you were sleeping out under the stars, feel free to reach out at info@headingnorthpodcast.com. You can find me all over social media. Just search Nick Risley on Facebook or Twitter, or Nick_Riz24 on Instagram. And if you want to see more from Heading North Podcast, you can go over to headingnorthpodcast.com. You can find Heading North on social media. Just search Heading North Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok, or Heading North Pod on Twitter. To support the show, head over to patreon.com/Heading North Podcast. You can also click the link in the show notes if you scroll down, and that will allow you to donate to the show. And that is a one-time donation. That way you aren't having to sign up for monthly contributions. Or you can pick up one of our awesome shirts. We have the Heading North T-Shirt. We have our Camp Hnp T-Shirt. And we also have a new T-shirt coming soon called I'd Tap That, which is a tree. It's a maple tree with a maple tap on it. I thought it was a really great pun, so I put it on a shirt. And I hope you guys enjoy those. You can go to headingnorthpodcast.com/shop. And to spread the word of this show, and make sure you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You guys, we'll see you next week.